This is a pot de creme au chocolat, a lovely French dessert. And here are Chocolat à la Nivernaise, loin chops, potatoes, carrots, and artichoke hearts, all cooked together in glorious harmony. And here is Consomme Madrilene. We're doing this 3-course chopped dinner in half an hour, next time on The French Chef. Here is our first course, Consomme Madrilene with tomatoes and herbs. And here is our main course, Chocolat à la Nivernaise, chops with carrots and artichoke hearts. And our dessert is petit pot de creme au chocolat. We're doing a whole 3-course chopped dinner in half an hour, today on The French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
Welcome to The French Chef. I'm Julia Child. We're going to do a whole 3-course French dinner today, and it's featuring chops, and I'm just putting a little cooking oil in the pan so we can start them. And this main course dish that we're using is one of those typical French dishes that's all cooked in one pan. It's called en cocotte in French cooking, or just casserole cooking, and you can do it either in a casserole in the oven or in an electric skillet, as we're going to do today. And these are going to be, you can use either veal chops or pork chops and get nice thick ones, and these are beautiful thick ones, one per person with, this is the loin chop, and as you remember how it's just like a tenderloin steak in miniature. There's your tenderloin and there's your loin strip, and that makes a lovely, nice serving. And these are about 1.25 inches thick. And we're going to brown them first. And be sure, when you're going to brown anything, be sure that you have it nice and dry. I've got these sitting on paper towels. And then another thing is, be sure that you have your oil very hot. You can use a combination of oil and butter or just any good cooking oil. And for either pork or veal chops, be sure that you get a very good quality, and you can always tell the quality of them by the color. I hadn't realized that pork chops should be very pale also, but if you're looking around, find the palest pink pork chops you can, because that means that they're tender. So they're going to be browned on one side, and then they're going to cook with vegetables. And these are going to cook with carrots and onions and artichoke hearts. And the reason this is called Chocolat, which means chops, à la Nivernaise, is because it has carrots in it. And carrots come from the province of Nièvre on the Loire River. And the main town there is Nevers. That sounds like a Frenchman saying never, doesn't it? And it has a perfectly beautiful medieval cathedral on it. And they raise an awful lot of carrots, so a lot of the dishes they use have carrots in them. I think some people don't like carrots very well, because I think they probably don't cook them the French way. They cook them to death, and then they don't have the lovely flavor that they should. And if you're going to cook them, as we are, with chops, they pick up an additional flavor from the chops, and they're just delicious. And these I'm going to cut into quarters. There are all kinds of cutting methods in French cooking. If you just cut them in slices like this, it's called paysan, or peasant cutting. And then if you cut them in quarters, and then cut the quarters into smaller pieces, that's called bourgeois, or middle class cooking. And then, if you want to be really fancy and do the haute cuisine, you take a little knife and you trim all the edges of the carrots. And then that becomes les carottes en gousse d'ail, or in the sort of roughly in the shape of a clove of garlic. But as we're doing all of this in half an hour this time, we don't have time to do any haute cuisine. So I'm just going to cut them all into middle-class quarters. And this is, we're going to serve 4 people, so probably, these are very large carrots, so probably 3 carrots will be enough. And then I'm cutting them into about 1.5 inches long. One good reason for cutting them too is that they cook a little faster, and also they look nice. There, that's going to be enough. And now these we have to do a little pre-cooking of the carrots. But first I'm going to take a look at the chops and see if they aren't browned nicely on one side. This pre-browning always gives things more flavor, and it also looks better. I don't really know as it sears the juices in, but it has an aesthetic value. And now the carrots have to have a little bit of pre-cooking before they go in with the chops. And I have a big pot of boiling water, and they're just going to go right into the boiling water, and that's called to blanch, or just pre-cook a little bit, and I'm going to put some salt in. They just need, say, 2 or 3 minutes, and then after they've just softened just a little bit when they go in and cook with the chops, then they'll finish cooking by the time that the chops have cooked. And then we have potatoes, and these are also going to be cut into middle-class quarters, and then cut into half. This, of course, with the potato also makes it cook faster. And these I'm going to be somewhat haute cuisine, of shaping them up just a little bit so that they will look attractive. The idea is to make them look all just about the same. And be sure for this kind of a dish that you get potatoes that are called all-purpose or boiling potatoes. You don't want to use baking potatoes, because if you do, they'll all come apart because they're so mealy. You want these to be sure and stay together. Now, when you're planning out a menu, if you're going to do a 3-course dinner, you should really think of it just sort of run your tongue over each course as you're thinking of it, to see how the menu will go together. Now, with this chops, with the vegetables that are going into it, it's going to be fairly hearty. So you'd have either a simple beginning or a simple ending, and then you could have one of them could be more rich. Now, for instance, we're going to have a simple beginning of Consomme Madrilene, which is consomme with tomatoes and herbs in it. So we can be a little fancier for our dessert. So that's why we can end up with a dessert with these little Pots de Creme au Chocolat, or little individual chocolate cream custards. But I think that sometimes you think, oh, I'd love to do such and such a dessert, which sounds very rich, and then you find that you've had a very rich main course, and you may end up with everything being cream, which would sort of take your appetite away and would also be bad planning. So be sure and think things out. And also, if you're going to do a quick menu like this, I always have a little group of quick dinners that I can get all ready in about half an hour, and then plan out how long you think everything is going to take and what things should be started first. You usually start with a thing that's going to take the longest to cook. And if you have, I think sometimes one is inclined to plunge in without thinking, and then find that that you sort of end up at 6s and 7s. Now with the potatoes, with 4 people, probably 2 or 3 pieces of potato would be enough. It just depends really on how much you want. And I'm going to have just about enough here with these 2 big potatoes that I had. And then these also have to be plunged into boiling water just to be blanched for a moment before they go in with the chops. So I'm just adding them in with the carrots. You notice I've got a basket here so I can just pull them out very easily. Now I'm going to take a look at the chops and see how they're doing. Those are browned very nicely, so I can take them out now, and then they will go in a moment. And I'm going to leave all of this fat in the pan, because now that the vegetables have blanched, draining them thoroughly, we don't want them to stick to the pan when they cook with the chops. So you want to shake them around. And the idea of this is not really to brown them, it's just to get all the excess moisture off. Because if you left the moisture on, the vegetables would stick to the pan, particularly the potatoes. That usually gets a little fat all over the stove, but it's easily cleaned off. And then take off some of the extra fat if you have too much. I find these bulb basters wonderfully useful. But I want to leave a little bit of the fat in because we're going to want to baste the vegetables and the chops as they cook. And then the chops goes back in again. Now I'm going to turn the heat down because now it's going to cook very much more slowly. I had it on this electric skillet at 375 to brown the chops, and now I'm putting it down to about 250. And now the chops get seasoned with some salt and pepper and herbs. And just a little bit on the vegetables too. Then you can use whatever herbs you feel would go nicely with them. If you're using veal chops, you could use tarragon, which would be very nice. Or with pork, you could use sage or that mixture called Italian seasoning. I'm putting in about, say, half a teaspoon. And these chops are going to cook for, about 20 minutes. It really depends on how thick they are. And be sure after you've gotten your vegetables in, you take your bulb baster and baste all the vegetables with this cooking oil. And then again, while they're cooking, baste them with the juices, because all these lovely juices are going to come out of the chops. And then put the cover on. And if you were cooking this in the oven, you'd put it in a preheated 325 oven in about 20 or 30 minutes, and that would be plenty. I forgot to put the pepper in, but I'll put some in. Doesn't make too much difference because I can always put it in later, but then it gives a nice flavor as it cooks along. And now that, for all intents and purposes, is really all you need to do, except baste maybe once or twice more. But we don't have any onions in yet, and I think it would be nice to have a little bit of onion flavor. So I'm going to use some scallions and just line them up. I don't need quite that many. Cut off the roots and just slice them. And then just cut these into thin slices. You could put garlic in if you like. I feel I use so much garlic, I'm just not going to use it this time. And those can go right in with the chops. And that isn't quite going quite fast enough. I'll put it up to about 275. You want to make sure that it's really cooking and making little cooking noises, just sort of making little noises in the pan. And now you can leave this just as it is. You could add another vegetable, such as frozen artichoke hearts. I've got some in the freezer. If I'd thought of it, I could have defrosted them. As it is, they're in a great hard lump here. So I want to soften them up. So I've got this water going, so I'll just dump them in there in the boiling water. In just about a moment or two, we'll break them apart, and then I can add them to the chops. In the meantime, clean off a few splatters. I think you'll find this a very nice way of cooking this en cocotte or in the casserole, because it gives your meat the most lovely taste, because it has absorbed the herbs and the flavor of the vegetables. Now let's see how those haven't broken apart enough so they can go in. Almost. They were so frozen hard that they really cooled the water off. But I think that they have now thawed enough so I can just add them right in on top of the chops. And there's one I can pull apart. And then you want to be sure and baste these again, because you want to get all your flavoring over the artichoke hearts. And then as this is cooking, just keep basting the vegetables a little bit. And that just makes it all taste better. And I think a little bit of salt on the artichoke hearts, and that's probably all they're going to need. And then basting any time that you think of it. And now we have our main course really all started. Nothing much needs to be done, so we can get to our dessert, our little Pots de Creme au chocolat. And this is, we start out having to melt some chocolate. In this case, it's very much easier than usual. I've got 2/3 cup or 4 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate bits in there. And I'm going to add all-purpose cream until the mark comes up to 1.5 cups. I can't see what that says now. There. No, it isn't quite 1.5 cups. I had it the wrong way. I've tried doing this with milk, and it just isn't as good as with cream. And as long as we're not having a fattening meal, we can use cream. So that just goes over moderate heat, and when the cream heats, the chocolate will melt. So that's really the easiest chocolate melting there is. And while that's melting, we can get to our first course, the Consomme Madrilene. And again, we've got this big pan of water, and Consomme Madrilene is just, I'm going to use canned consomme, and it just has some tomatoes in it. And I'm putting the tomatoes in the boiling water, and they want to stay for just 10 seconds, and then I can peel them easily. And I think that's 10 seconds. I didn't really count. Now we're through with this handy boiling water. And I'm just going to use some canned beef consomme. I think it's amazing what you can do with just a few little tricks with some of these canned convenience foods to make them taste like your own concoction. And this you'll be able to serve either hot or cold, but it's going to be flavored up with the tomato and then with a few little herbs. And so the tomato, when you peel it, just peel the peel right into the consomme. And that'll be boiled up and then strained, and that just gives the consomme just a little extra taste. And I think 2 cans is going to be enough for 4 people. See how easily that peel comes off when you've just dropped it in the boiling water. There's your other one. So I'm cutting out that little root, that little stem end, because you don't want that in your. This tomato pulp is going to be a garniture, and you want it to be nice and delicate. And then cut the tomato in half, and just squeeze all the juice and seeds into the soup. You want to try and get all of these seeds in. I mean, all of the seeds out of the tomato. Then that'll just heat in that. It'll just give a little tiny added flavor. And then take your tomato and just chop it up fine with a sharp knife. And this you can do ahead of time and just put in a little bowl, in the covered bowl in the refrigerator. You want to be sure that you're chopping the pulp and not mashing it. And a little bit of parsley is going to be nice if you had some fresh chives. That would be very nice too. I just have parsley this time. But that's now all ready. And as I said, you could do that ahead any time you want. And then when you're ready to serve your soup, if it has simmered a little longer than it has here, it would be better because you get more of your tomato flavor. Just strain it, and then and just before serving, then you put your tomato pulp in, and you can simmer it for just about a moment, just to poach the tomato pulp. And another thing, I think, also very much hides the taste of the canned soup is just about a tablespoon or two of port wine. That makes a great deal of difference in the soup. And this you can serve either hot or cold. If you chill it, because it's tomato consomme, it will gel very lightly, and the herbs are very pretty in it. And now we've got all of this done, we can now get finally to the dessert. And here's our chocolate, and the cream is hot, and the chocolate's practically melted there. It just needs a little bit of stirring around. And then we're ready to make the custard. I'm going to make it over here by the sink. Now a pot de creme au chocolat, a lot of people think a pot de creme is a chocolate mousse, but it isn't. Because in French culinary language, anything that says creme, that's C-R-E-M-E, is a custard, and a custard is eggs and egg yolks and liquid cooked together in a body, and that makes a creme. That's a good thing to remember. I used to get mixed up myself until someone put me straight. And now for this, we're going to make just enough for 4 servings, so we have 1 egg and 2 yolks, and they just get mixed up very lightly. We don't want them to foam up. And then this hot chocolate and cream, we've got to stir that up a little bit more, gets very gradually poured in. And this is always with anything with eggs in, so that they won't scramble when you add something hot. You just make very little dribbles in. And the object is to heat the eggs so gradually that they can't scramble. And then after you put in about half a cup, you can go a little bit faster. This is going to get strained, so if it's just little soft lumps, that's quite all right. And then you want a little additional flavoring. In this, you can use vanilla, but I've tried, because I did a lot of these to give you the best one. The best thing to put in is some dark Jamaican rum. And I'm putting in a capful, which is about a tablespoon, and that's all you need, and it just gives an absolutely lovely flavor to it. And then you're going to cook it in these little containers of some sort. Now this is the French one called a pot de creme. It's just a cute little cup with a cover on it. And if you don't have one of those, you can use a little ramekin like this, or you might find a cute little thing with a tail on it. Or if you have nothing else, just use a plain oven-proof glass cup. I'll use one of each. So we'll have a complete variety. And now this is to be strained. You always, with a custard, you have to strain it, because there might be some little bits of eggshell, or those little sort of white knobs that are in the egg white. I don't see any there, but this is always the right thing to do, because you don't want any little lumps in your custard. And now, you want to see, one reason we didn't beat the eggs hard is because you don't want to have any foam, because these are going to cook in these little cups, and if you have foam on the top, which makes little holes, the foam, the little bubbles just make little holes in the cooked custard. And we want the tops to be lovely and smooth. This is really enough for 4 half-cup containers. I have a little bit extra, but then that's really for the cook who can eat that herself, because it's just as good cooked, uncooked as it is cooked. And now this has got to be baked in the oven in boiling water. And I've got this boiling water gadget here, which I must say is convenient. And you want just about an inch of water, or enough to come at least halfway up the ramekins. And with these little tiny Pots de Creme, even if they have a cover, you don't cook it with the cover, because it just doesn't do very well cooked with the cover, but you have to cover it with something. So I'm taking some aluminum foil and putting it loosely on, and then I have to go very slowly to the oven, because I don't want to slop any water into these little custard cups. And this is going to go into a 350-degree oven that's been preheated and set it in the lower third, and they cook, for these little ramekins, they just cook just about 20 minutes. And you can tell when they're done, because it makes the custard puffs up into just a little low dome. You know, when it went in, it was perfectly flat, and then it just makes a little dome, and then you shake it. And the custard is gently set, but it still trembles a little bit. And don't overcook, because if it does, the eggs bring liquid out into the custard. And you can serve these either hot or warm or cold, and I've got some in the refrigerator. I'm going to serve them cold, but you see how very quick that is to do. I think probably they're nicer cold. The main thing is that you can get them ready awfully fast, and even do them a day ahead of time and just cover them with foil. And so here they are done, and then you can cover them with some cream, or if you have leftover whipped cream, you can make little decorative things by pushing the cream through a pastry tube and then sticking it in the freezer. It's very convenient to have, because then this all melts as this all, what do I mean to say, defrosts as you, in about 2 or 3 minutes. So here we are already. There. Now we have our Consomme Madrilene with the tomatoes and the herbs in it. And then we have our Chocolat à la Nivernaise, our lovely thick chops with its lovely smell of herbs and the vegetables which have cooked all around it. And about 20 to 30 minutes of cooking, and it's all done, and it's also made its own juices. And with this I would serve a rosé wine. Now you see, people keep saying, oh, French cooking is so long and complicated. Well, I must say this looks possibly a little complicated, and it certainly smells as though one had spent hours in the kitchen. But we know better. It's just a little French chopped dinner in half an hour. That's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.